Where the hell is Martinez? Richard Caldwell's voice cracked with barely contained panic as he stared at his phone. The CEO of Caldwell Industries had exactly 12 minutes before the most important meeting of his career, and his translator had just texted that he was stuck in traffic on the other side of Manhattan. Across the mahogany conference table sat 3 executives from Nakamura Corporation, a Japanese conglomerate ready to sign a $3.2 million manufacturing contract. They spoke 0 English. Richard spoke 0 Japanese, and the deal that would save his struggling company from bankruptcy was about to collapse before it even started. "Sir, I've called every translation service in the city," his assistant Jennifer whispered urgently. "Nobody can get here in less than 45 minutes. Richard's hands trembled as he straightened his tie for the 3rd time. The Nakamura executives exchanged glances, their polite smiles beginning to fade into something that looked dangerously close to offense. In Japanese business culture, this kind of disorganization was an insult. "My name is Lisa Chen Morrison, and I was emptying the trash can near the conference room door when I heard the CEO's world falling apart in real time. 23 years old, wearing my mother's old cleaning uniform with my name stitched crookedly on the pocket, I was supposed to be invisible. That's what people like Richard Caldwell paid people like my mom for, to clean their offices and disappear, before anyone important noticed. But I noticed everything, including the fact that Mr. Nakamura had just said something in Japanese that made his colleagues shift uncomfortably in their seats. "They're leaving," I said quietly, more to myself than anyone else. Richard's head snapped toward me. "What?" "The older gentleman just told his team they should leave. He said this level of disrespect suggests you're not serious about the partnership." The conference room went silent. Every executive, every assistant, every person in a suit that cost more than my mom's monthly rent turned to stare at the black girl in the cleaning uniform, standing by the door with a trash bag in her hand. "You speak Japanese." Richard's voice carried equal parts disbelief and desperate hope. "Japanese, Mandarin, Korean, and Spanish," I replied, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was hammering. "My mum's been the night janitor here for 16 years. I grew up doing homework in empty offices, watching international business channels on the break room TV because we couldn't afford cable at home. Languages were free." Richard looked at me like I'd just materialized out of thin air. To him, I probably had. He'd walked past my mother 1,000 times without seeing her. Walked past me dozens of times during the evening shifts when I helped her finish faster. We were furniture, wallpaper, part of the building itself. "Can you—" he started, then stopped, his corporate brain clearly struggling to process the situation. "Would you be able to translate for this meeting?" Mr. Nakamura said something sharp in Japanese. His tone made it clear they were seconds from standing up. "He's asking if this is a joke," I translated. "If you're so unprepared that you're asking the cleaning staff to conduct business negotiations." Richard's face went pale. Jennifer looked like she might faint. The other American executives in the room were frozen, watching their careers potentially circle the drain. I should have stayed quiet, should have emptied my trash and disappeared like I was supposed to. But I'd spent 23 years watching people like Richard Caldwell treat people like my mother as if they were invisible, watching them waste opportunities, make stupid decisions, and still somehow end up on top, while people who worked 3 times as hard struggled to pay rent. And now for just a moment, Richard Caldwell needed me more than I needed him. "Tell them," Richard said, his voice tight. "Tell them that our translator had an emergency, but that we have someone fluent who can help us communicate. Tell them we deeply apologize for the confusion and would be honored if they'd give us the opportunity to present our proposal." I met Mr. Nakamura's eyes and spoke in Japanese, my accent flawless from years of practice, but I didn't say what Richard told me to say. Not exactly. "Mr. Nakamura, my name is Lisa Chen Morrison. My mother has cleaned these offices for 16 years, And I've been learning Japanese since I was 12 years old by watching NHK on the break room television. Mr. Caldwell is unprepared today, and that's disrespectful to you and your time. But his company makes excellent products, and this deal would benefit both parties. If you're willing to look past his disorganization, I can ensure clear communication for this meeting. The choice is yours. I held my breath. I'd just told the truth instead of feeding them corporate nonsense, which meant I'd either saved the meeting or destroyed it completely. Either way, I was probably getting fired. Mr. Nakamura studied me for a long moment. Then slowly, he smiled. He responded in Japanese, and I translated for Richard. Mr. Nakamura says that honesty is more valuable than polish. He appreciates that I acknowledge the disrespect rather than making excuses. He'll stay for the meeting, but he's evaluating both the business proposal and the character of the people presenting it. Richard exhaled like he'd been holding his breath underwater. Thank you. Tell him thank you, and that we won't waste his time. The meeting began, and I found myself standing at the head of the conference table, translating between two worlds that had never expected to need someone like me. Richard presented his manufacturing proposal, quality control processes, production timelines, cost breakdowns. I translated everything precisely, adding cultural context when necessary to make sure. Nothing was lost in translation, but I also noticed things. Richard's proposal had gaps, assumptions about Japanese business practices that were completely wrong, pricing structures that would seem insulting to a company like Nakamura Corporation. Every time Richard said something that would damage the deal, I had a choice. Translate exactly what he said and watch the meeting fail, or adjust the message to fix his mistakes. I started fixing them. When Richard quoted a price that was too low, suggesting his products were cheap rather than affordable, I translated it with context about American market pricing and quality guarantees. When he made a joke that would be offensive in Japanese business culture, I turned it into a respectful comment about looking forward to a long partnership. I was saving Richard's deal, and he had no idea. Mr. Nakamura asked detailed questions about production, capacity, quality control, and shipping logistics. His questions were sharp, designed to expose any weaknesses in Caldwell Industries' operations. Richard answered them, and I translated, but I also watched Mr. Nakamura's reactions and adjusted my translations to address his real concerns, not just his surface questions. 2 hours later, Mr. Nakamura stood and bowed. We'll review the proposal and provide our decision within 3 days, I translated. He's impressed with the thoroughness of the presentation and appreciates the respectful communication. After the Japanese executives left, Richard turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Relief, gratitude, or maybe just the dawning realization that the janitor's daughter had just saved his company. That was, he started, then seemed to run out of words. You were incredible. Where did you learn to do that? The break room TV, like I said, and the public library, and YouTube, and every free resource I could find because people like me don't get to pay for fancy language schools. Jennifer stepped forward, her corporate smile back in place. Well, we're very grateful for your help today, Lisa. We'll make sure to add a bonus to your next paycheck. A bonus, like I was a waitress who'd provided good service. Actually, Richard said slowly, and I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. I'd like to discuss something else. Lisa, would you be available to come back if Nakamura wants to continue? Negotiations. I work the evening cleaning shift Monday through Friday, I replied. So yes, I'm available during business hours for appropriate compensation. The words hung in the air. I'd just negotiated with a CEO, and everyone in the room knew it. Richard's jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded. Of course, we'll discuss terms. Jennifer, get Lisa's contact information. As I walked out of that conference room, still carrying my trash bag, I felt something shift inside me. For 16 years, my mother had been invisible in this building. For the past 2 years since I'd started, Helping her, I'd been invisible too. But today, for 2 hours, I'd been the most important person in that room. And Richard Caldwell, the man who'd never once acknowledged my mother's existence, had needed me desperately. The question was, what was I going to do with that power? Because if you're watching this story unfold and wondering how a janitor's daughter goes from emptying trash cans to closing million-dollar deals, you'll want to subscribe to see how one moment of visibility can change everything, especially when the people who've ignored you suddenly realize you're the only one who can save them. 3 days passed before I heard anything from Caldwell Industries. 3 days of showing up at 6 p.m. to help my mom vacuum executive offices and scrub conference room floors, wondering if that meeting had been real or some kind of fever dream. On Thursday evening, as I was wiping down, the same conference table where I'd translated a multi-million-dollar negotiation, Jennifer found me. "Lisa, Mr. Caldwell would like to see you in his office." My mom, who was emptying wastebaskets nearby, looked up sharply. In 16 years, she'd never been called to the CEO's office for anything. Good. In her experience, being noticed by management meant being blamed for something. "It's okay, Mom," I said quietly in Mandarin, our private language when we didn't want others to understand. "This is about the translation work." "Be careful," she replied in the same language. "Men like him don't give anything without taking more in return." She was right to be cautious. My mother, Susan Morrison, had come to America from Guangzhou with a nursing degree that nobody would recognize. She'd spent 16 years cleaning offices for people who never bothered to learn that she'd once managed a hospital ward, that she spoke 3 languages, that she'd raised a daughter alone after my father died, working double shifts to keep us fed. Richard's office was exactly what you'd expect. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, furniture that cost more than our annual rent, and photographs of him shaking hands with people who mattered. He was on the phone when I entered, gesturing for me to sit while he finished his conversation. "Yes, Senator, I completely understand. We'll have those numbers to you by Monday." He hung up and turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Lisa, thank you for coming up. You asked to see me." "Right. So, good news. Nakamura Corporation accepted our proposal. They want to move forward with the contract, but they have some additional questions and want to schedule a follow-up meeting next week." He paused, waiting for me to react with appropriate gratitude. I didn't. "Congratulations, that's a significant deal for your company." His smile faltered slightly. "Yes, well, we couldn't have done it without your help, which is why I wanted to discuss compensation. Jennifer mentioned you asked about appropriate payment." He slid a check across his desk. $500. I looked at it for a long moment. "Mr. Caldwell, professional interpreters for business negotiations charge between $150 and $300 per hour. I worked for 2 hours. This is generous for a tip, but it's not professional compensation." His expression hardened. "Lisa, let's be realistic here. You're not a professional interpreter. You don't have certifications or formal training. You helped us out of a difficult situation, and we're grateful. But let's not pretend this is your actual career." "You're right," I said calmly. "I'm not a professional. I'm better. Professional interpreters translate words. I translated cultural context, fixed your mistakes, and saved your deal from collapsing at least 6 times during that meeting when you said things that would have offended Mr. Nakamura. So, let's be realistic. You're not paying me for translation. You're paying me for saving your company from bankruptcy." The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. "I see." Richard leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "You know, Lisa, you're in an interesting position here. You be very valuable to this company if you play your cards right, but you could also find yourself back to just cleaning offices if you overestimate your importance." There it was, the threat wrapped in corporate politeness. "The follow-up meeting with Nakamura is Tuesday at 2 p.m., he continued. "I'd like you to be there. We'll pay you $200 for your time. Take it or leave it." I stood up, leaving the check on his desk. I'll think about it and let you know by Monday. His eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? You said take it or leave it. I'm taking the weekend to consider whether I want to continue working with Caldwell Industries in any capacity. I'll email Jennifer my decision on Monday morning. I walked out before he could respond, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. I just negotiated with, no, I just challenged, a CEO, a white man who was used to people, doing exactly what he told them to do, exactly when he told them to do it. My mom was waiting by the service elevator, her face tight with worry. What happened? I think I either just got myself a real opportunity or got us both fired, I admitted. That weekend, I did research, real research. I looked up every public record I could find about Caldwell Industries, about Richard Caldwell, about the Nakamura deal. What I found was fascinating. Caldwell Industries was drowning. 3 failed product launches in 2 years, a lawsuit from a former partner, and debts that were piling up faster than revenue could cover them. The Nakamura contract wasn't just important, it was the only thing standing between Richard and complete financial collapse, which meant I had more leverage than he wanted me to know. I also found something else. 5 years ago, there had been another janitor working at Caldwell Industries, Maria Santos, a woman who'd reported sexual harassment by a senior executive. She'd been fired 2 weeks later for performance issues. The executive had been promoted. My mother had known Maria, had watched her get destroyed for speaking up, had learned the lesson that Richard Caldwell wanted all of us to learn. Stay invisible, stay quiet, and maybe you get to keep your job. On Monday morning, I sent Jennifer an email. I'll attend Tuesday's meeting under the following terms: $500 flat rate for the meeting, plus $200 per hour for any preparation time required. I'll also need a formal contract stating that my mother's employment is completely separate from my consulting work and cannot be affected by our business relationship. If these terms are acceptable, please send the contract by end of business today. Jennifer called me within 10 minutes. Lisa, this is highly unusual. Mr. Caldwell is offering you an opportunity here, and you're making demands like I'm a professional providing valuable services? I interrupted. Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. Those are my terms. He can accept them, or he can find another Japanese translator who can also fix his cultural mistakes and save his deals. I'm sure there are plenty of people available on short notice. There was a long pause. I'll discuss this with Mr. Caldwell. The contract arrived at 4:47 p.m. They'd agreed to everything except the hourly rate. They counted with $150 per hour. For prep time, I signed it and sent it back. Tuesday's meeting was different from the first one. This time, I arrived wearing clothes I'd borrowed from my college roommate, a blazer that almost fit and slacks that were slightly too long. This time, I walked through the front door instead of the service entrance. The receptionist looked confused. Can I help you? Lisa Chen Morrison. I have a 2 p.m. meeting with Mr. Caldwell and the Nakamura Corporation representatives. She checked her computer, her confusion deepening. I don't see you on the list. Check again. I'm the interpreter. Jennifer appeared, her smile tight. Lisa, you're here. Actually, we need you to use the side entrance. Mr. Caldwell doesn't want the Nakamura executives to see you coming in through the main lobby. Why not? Well, it might be confusing for them. Last time you were in your work, uniform, and now we just want to maintain consistency. Translation: Richard didn't want his important clients to know that his interpreter was the janitor's daughter. He wanted them to think I was a professional he'd hired, not someone he'd found emptying trash cans. No, I said simply. Jennifer blinked. I'm sorry. I said no. I'm a consultant providing professional services. I'll enter through the front door like every other professional in this building. If Mr. Caldwell has a problem with that, he can conduct his meeting without me. I walked past her toward the elevator, my borrowed blazer suddenly feeling like armor. The meeting itself went smoothly. Mr. Nakamura had questions about production schedules and quality control measures. I translated everything precisely, once again catching and correcting Richard's mistakes before they could damage the relationship. At one point, Richard tried to rush through a technical explanation, and I stopped him. "Mr. Nakamura needs more detail on that point," I said in English. "In Japanese business culture, thoroughness is more important than speed. If you rush, he'll think you're hiding something." Richard's jaw clenched. But he slowed down and provided the details. Mr. Nakamura nodded approvingly. After the meeting, as the Nakamura executives were leaving, Mr. Nakamura said something to me in Japanese that made me smile. "What did he say?" Richard asked after they'd left. "He said that you're fortunate to have someone on your team who understands both languages and respect. He said that's rare in American business." "Well, that's good. That's very good." Richard loosened his tie, relief evident on his face. "Listen, Lisa, I think we got off on the wrong foot last week. You're clearly talented, and this deal is going to be huge for us. I'd like to discuss bringing you on in a more formal capacity, maybe as a consultant for our international business development. What kind of compensation are we talking about?" "We could do $2,000 a month retainer, plus per meeting fees. You'd be on call for any international negotiations we have." I did the math in my head. $2,000 a month was less than my mum made cleaning offices, and on call meant they could demand my time whenever they wanted. "I'll need to think about it," I said. His expression darkened. "Lisa, I'm offering you a real opportunity. Here, a chance to do something more than clean offices. Most people in your position would be grateful." "Most people in my position," I replied quietly, "have been taught to be grateful for scraps. But I'm not most people, Mr. Caldwell. I'm the person who saved your company twice now, and I'm starting to wonder if you actually understand what that's worth." I left him standing in the conference room, probably for the first time in his life, unsure whether he was the one with the power in a negotiation. That night, as my mum and I cleaned the executive offices, she asked me what I was doing. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted, wiping down Richard's desk, the same desk where he'd offered me $500 like it was a fortune. "But I know I'm tired of being invisible, and I know that right now he needs me more than I need him." "Be careful, Bao Bao," my mom said, using her Mandarin term of endearment. "Men like him don't like being reminded that they need anyone, especially not people they think are beneath them." She was right. But what she didn't know yet was that I'd already started planning something that would make Richard Caldwell realize exactly how much he'd underestimated the janitor's daughter, because while I'd been translating his meetings and saving his deals, I'd also been learning everything about his business. And I'd noticed something that Richard, in all his Ivy League arrogance, had completely missed. The Nakamura deal wasn't just an opportunity for Caldwell Industries. It was an opportunity for someone smart enough to see the bigger picture, someone who understood both the American and Asian business worlds, someone who'd spent years being invisible and had learned to see everything. The question wasn't whether Richard Caldwell would try to use me. The question was whether he'd realize I was using him right back, until the moment came when I didn't need him anymore at all. The third meeting with Nakamura Corporation happened 2 weeks later, and this time Richard didn't even pretend to negotiate my rate. He sent Jennifer an email with the meeting, time and a curt message. "Lisa will be there." Not a question, a command. I showed up 30 minutes early and found Richard in the conference room with his senior team, 3 vice presidents who'd never acknowledged my existence when I was cleaning their offices. They were reviewing talking points, and I could immediately see the problems. "Mr. Caldwell, this pricing structure is going to insult them," I said, pointing to a document on the table. "You're trying to charge them 40% more than your domestic clients. In Asian business culture, that signals you think they're foolish enough to overpay. David Chen, the VP of Operations, looked up with barely concealed irritation. Despite sharing my last name, he'd never once spoken to me during the months I'd cleaned his office. "I'm sorry. Who are you to question our pricing strategy?" "I'm the person who's going to have to translate your pricing strategy and watch Mr. Nakamura's face when he realizes you're trying to exploit him," I replied. "And then I'm going to have to fix it on the fly so your deal doesn't collapse." "Richard, is this really appropriate?" David turned to the CEO. "Having the translator question our business decisions?" Richard's expression was unreadable. "Lisa, we appreciate your cultural insights, but the pricing has been carefully calculated by our finance team. Your finance team doesn't understand that Mr. Nakamura will see this as disrespect, not business. But sure, let's go with your carefully calculated approach and see what happens." The meeting started exactly as I'd predicted. When Richard presented the pricing, Mr. Nakamura's expression didn't change, but his lead negotiator, Mr. Tanaka, asked a pointed question in Japanese. He wants to know if you charge all your international partners these rates, or if you've created special pricing specifically for Japanese companies, I translated. Richard, oblivious to the trap, smiled. "Tell them this is our standard international rate structure." I paused, then made a decision. "Mr. Tanaka, I need to be honest with you. This pricing is higher than Caldwell Industries charges domestic partners. Mr. Caldwell believes it's justified by international shipping costs and currency exchange considerations. However, I personally think there's room for negotiation, if you'd like to discuss it." I didn't translate that for Richard. I just told him, Mr. Tanaka is considering the pricing structure. What happened next was a masterclass in negotiation. Mr. Tanaka and Mr. Nakamura had a rapid conversation in Japanese that Richard couldn't follow. They were discussing whether to walk away or push back on the pricing. I could have stayed silent and let the deal die. Instead, I interjected in Japanese. "Gentlemen, if I may offer a perspective, Caldwell Industries is struggling financially. This pricing reflects desperation, not disrespect. Mr. Caldwell needs this deal to survive, which means you have significant leverage to negotiate terms that benefit Nakamura Corporation. The question is whether the partnership itself has value beyond this initial pricing disagreement." Mr. Nakamura studied me for a long moment, then asked in Japanese, "Why are you helping us instead of your employer?" "Because I believe in fair business," I replied in the same language. "And because Mr. Caldwell doesn't actually employ me, he just thinks he does." Something that might have been amusement flickered across Mr. Nakamura's face. He turned to Richard and spoke, and I translated. "Mr. Nakamura appreciates your proposal, but believes the pricing needs significant adjustment. He'd like to propose a counter-offer." The negotiation that followed was brutal. Mr. Nakamura, now understanding that he had the upper hand, pushed for better terms on everything: pricing, payment schedules, quality guarantees. Richard, sweating through his expensive shirt, kept looking at me desperately, trying to figure out how the meeting had shifted so dramatically. I translated everything faithfully, but I also added context that helped Nakamura Corporation while keeping Richard from completely collapsing. It was a delicate balance, giving Mr. Nakamura the advantage he deserved while keeping Richard's company alive enough to be useful. By the end of the meeting, they'd agreed on terms that were far better for Nakamura than Richard's original proposal, but still profitable enough for Caldwell Industries to survive. After the Japanese executives left, Richard turned on me. "What the hell happened in there? I had a solid proposal, and somehow we ended up agreeing to terms that cut our profit margin by 30%. "You ended up with a deal instead of no deal," I replied calmly. "Your solid proposal would have sent them. Walking out in the first 15 minutes, I saved your company again. By undermining my negotiating position, by being realistic about your negotiating position. You're not negotiating from strength, Mr. Caldwell. You're negotiating from desperation. The sooner you accept that, the better." Decisions you'll make. David Chen stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. Richard, we can't have a translator who's actively working against us. This is completely unacceptable. Then find another translator who speaks fluent Japanese and understands international business culture, I said. I'll wait. The room went silent. We all knew there wasn't time to find someone else. The contract needed to be finalized within 2 weeks, and I was the only reason it had gotten this far. Richard's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his expression shifted from anger to something more complicated. Everyone out. I need to speak with Lisa privately. After the others left, Richard sat down heavily in one of the conference room chairs. He suddenly looked older, tired in a way that expensive suits couldn't hide. That was Nakamura's assistant, he said quietly. Mr. Nakamura wants to schedule a dinner meeting next week to finalize the contract details. He specifically requested that you be there as translator. Of course he did. I'm the only person in this company he trusts. Richard looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than arrogance or calculation in his eyes. It might have been fear. What do you want, Lisa? What do I want? You're clearly not doing this just for the consulting fees. You're playing some kind of game here, and I can't figure out what it is. So tell me, what do you actually want? It was a good question. What did I want? I wanted my mother to stop scrubbing toilets for people who treated her like she was invisible. I wanted to stop borrowing clothes for meetings because I couldn't afford professional attire. I wanted to walk into rooms and have people see me as someone who mattered, not someone who cleaned up after them. But more than that, I wanted to prove something. To Richard, to David Chen, to every person who'd ever looked through me like I was furniture. I wanted them to realize that the people they'd dismissed were smarter, more capable, and more valuable than they'd ever imagined. I want equity, I said. Richard blinked. What? Not in Caldwell Industries. Your company is a sinking ship, and we both know it. But the Nakamura deal is going to be worth millions over the next 5 years. I want 10% of the net profit from that contract. As a consultant who made the deal possible, that's insane. That would be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yes, it would, and it would still be less than what I've earned by saving your company 3 times now. But if you think that's insane, feel free to conduct next week's dinner meeting without me. I'm sure Mr. Nakamura will be very understanding when you show up with a different translator who doesn't know anything about the relationship we've built. I stood up to leave, and Richard's voice stopped me. 5%. I turned back. 8%. And you cover my mother's health insurance for the next 5 years. Why would I cover why would I? Mother's insurance. Because she's worked for your company for 16 years without benefits, because she's cleaned up after you and your executives while you've treated her like she doesn't exist, and because if you want me to keep saving your deals, you're going to start treating the people who make your company function with basic human dignity. Richard stared at me for a long moment. I could see him calculating, weighing his options, trying to figure out if he could find a way around this. 6%, he finally said, and your mother gets full benefits starting next month. But I want a contract that locks you in as our exclusive translator for all Asian business dealings for the next 2 years. 1 year, I counted, and I maintain the right to take on other clients as long as they don't directly compete with Caldwell Industries. 18 months. Deal. We shook our hands, and I felt the shift in power between us. Richard Caldwell had just negotiated with me like I was an equal, not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice. That evening, I met someone who would change everything. Her name was Patricia Wong, and she was a senior partner at a venture capital firm that specialized in Asian American business ventures. I'd reached out to her after finding her profile on LinkedIn, mentioning that I was working on international business deals and would love to learn from her experience. We met at a coffee shop in Midtown, and I told her everything. The meetings, the translations, the way I'd been navigating between 2 worlds that didn't think I belonged in either. Patricia listened carefully, asking sharp questions that told me she understood exactly what I was describing. When I finished, she smiled. "Lisa, do you know what you've actually been doing these past few weeks?" Translating. "No, you've been building relationships with Japanese executives who trust you more than they trust your client. You've been learning the details of a multi-million-dollar manufacturing deal, and you've been positioning yourself as the essential bridge between American and Asian business interests." She leaned forward. "You're not a translator. You're a consultant who happens to speak multiple languages, and you're sitting on an opportunity that's much bigger than a percentage of one deal." "What do you mean?" "Nakamura Corporation is one of the largest conglomerates in Japan. If they trust you, if you've built a real relationship with Mr. Nakamura, that's worth more than anything Richard Caldwell could ever pay you. That's a door into an entire market." My heart started beating faster. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that you're thinking too small. You're negotiating for scraps from Richard's table when you could be building your own table. But you'd need to be smart about it, strategic, and you'd need someone who understands how to structure these kinds of opportunities." "Someone like you?" Patricia smiled. "I invest in people who see opportunities that others miss, people who've been underestimated and are ready to prove everyone wrong. From what you've told me, Lisa, you're exactly that kind of person." We talked for 2 more hours. Patricia explained how consulting firms worked, how to structure business relationships, how to leverage one client relationship into many. She talked about the Asian business community in New York, about the opportunities for someone who could bridge cultural and language barriers. By the time I left that coffee shop, I wasn't thinking about percentages of Richard's deal anymore. I was thinking about something much bigger. I was thinking about what would happen if the janitor's daughter stopped asking for a seat at someone else's table and built her own instead. The dinner meeting with Mr. Nakamura was scheduled for the following Thursday at an upscale Japanese restaurant in Manhattan. Richard sent me the details with a reminder to dress appropriately and remember that you're representing Caldwell Industries. But as I prepared for that meeting, I wasn't thinking about representing Richard's company. I was thinking about the conversation I was going to have with Mr. Nakamura, a conversation that Richard would never know about, conducted in a language he couldn't understand. Because Patricia was right. I'd been thinking too small. I'd been so focused on making Richard Caldwell see my value that I'd missed the bigger picture. Mr. Nakamura didn't need Richard. He needed someone who could help him navigate American business culture, someone he could trust, someone who understood both worlds. He needed me. And if I played this right, the dinner meeting where Richard thought he was finalizing his deal would actually be the moment when I started building something that would make his entire company irrelevant. The janitor's daughter was about to stop translating other people's success stories and start writing her own. The week before the dinner meeting, I barely slept, not from anxiety, but from preparation. Patricia had introduced me to her network, other consultants, business attorneys, people who understood international commerce. I spent every free moment learning everything I could about corporate structure, consulting agreements, and most importantly, about Nakamura Corporation's business interests. Beyond their deal with Caldwell Industries, what I discovered was fascinating. Nakamura wasn't just a manufacturing company. They were actively expanding into the American market across multiple sectors: technology, real estate, consumer goods, and they were struggling with the same problem. Everywhere, finding trustworthy American partners who understood Japanese business culture. They're losing millions on failed partnerships, Patricia explained during one of our strategy sessions. American companies see Japanese investors as easy money and try to take advantage. Japanese companies see American partners as unreliable and culturally insensitive. Someone who can bridge that gap authentically, that's worth a fortune. But I'm 23 years old with no formal business experience, I pointed out. Why would they take me seriously? Because you've already proven yourself. You Saved Richard's deal 3 times. You've earned Mr. Nakamura's trust. And most importantly, you're not trying to sell them something. You're trying to help them succeed. That authenticity is rare, Lisa. Don't underestimate it. She helped me prepare a proposal, not for Richard, but for Nakamura. Corporation, a consulting service that would help them vet American business partners, navigate cultural differences, and avoid the costly mistakes they'd been making. I would be their American representative, their cultural bridge, their trusted advisor. It was audacious, it was probably crazy, but it was also exactly what they needed. The night before the dinner, my mum found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by notes and printouts, practicing my pitch in Japanese. "Bao Bao, what are you doing?" she asked in Mandarin. I looked up at her, this woman who'd spent 16 years being invisible, so I could have opportunities, who'd worked double shifts so I could go to college, who'd never complained, never asked for recognition, never demanded that people see her as more than just the cleaning lady. "I'm building something, Mom. Something that means you never have to clean another office." She sat down across from me, her tired eyes studying my face. "This is dangerous. Men like Richard Caldwell don't like it when people they've looked down on suddenly rise up." "I know, but I'm not asking his permission." She was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table and took my hand. "Your father would be proud. He always said you had fire in you. I just hope you don't get burned." Thursday evening arrived with the weight of everything I'd been planning. I wore a dress I'd actually bought for myself this time, nothing expensive but mine. Professional, confident, the armor of someone who belonged in upscale restaurants and business dinners. Richard picked me up in his car, reviewing talking points the entire drive. He was nervous, I realized. This dinner would finalize the contract that would save his company, and he knew that everything depended on the relationship I'd built with Mr. Nakamura. "Just translate exactly what I say," he instructed for the 3rd time. "No improvising, no adding your own commentary. This is too important." "Of course, Mr. Caldwell." He didn't notice the tone in my voice, didn't catch that I was agreeing to his instructions while having no intention of following them. The restaurant was exactly the kind of place where deals worth millions got made. Private dining room, impeccable service, the kind of quiet elegance that whispered money. Mr. Nakamura was already there with Mr. Tanaka and one other executive I hadn't met before. The introductions were formal, respectful. I translated Richard's greeting and Mr. Nakamura responded with equal formality. But when his eyes met mine, there was something else there. A question, maybe, or recognition that something had shifted since our last meeting. The dinner started with small talk. Richard tried to discuss business immediately, but I gently redirected, explaining in English that Japanese business culture required building relationship first. We talked about New York, about Tokyo, about cultural differences and similarities. And then Mr. Nakamura did something unexpected. He asked me a question in Japanese, but he asked it in a way that made it clear he didn't want me to translate it for Richard. "Ms. Chen Morrison, I'm curious about something. You translate for Mr. Caldwell, but I sense you're not truly part of his company. What is your actual role here?" I could have deflected, could have given a safe answer that maintained the fiction that I was Richard's employee. Instead, I told the truth. "I'm an independent consultant, Mr. Nakamura. I've been helping Mr. Caldwell because his deal with your company benefits both parties. But my loyalty is to successful business outcomes, not to any particular company." Richard, who couldn't understand our conversation, smiled politely and waited for me to translate. I told him, "Mr. Nakamura is complimenting your company's professionalism." Mr. Nakamura's expression didn't change, but I saw the understanding in his eyes. He knew I'd just lied to Richard, and he knew I'd done it deliberately. "What did he say?" Richard asked me. "He's pleased with how the negotiations have progressed," I translated, which was technically true, just not what we'd actually been discussing. The dinner continued, and I found myself conducting two parallel conversations, one in English with Richard about contract terms and production schedules, and another in Japanese with Mr. Nakamura about trust, partnership, and the challenges of cross-cultural business. During the main course, Mr. Nakamura asked another question in Japanese. Ms. Chen Morrison, if you were advising Nakamura Corporation on American business partnerships, what would you tell us? This was it, the opening I'd been waiting for. I would tell you that you're approaching the American market with the wrong partners, I replied in Japanese. You're working with established companies like Caldwell Industries because they seem safe, but they're desperate and will overpromise and underdeliver. What you need is someone who understands both cultures, who can help you identify genuine opportunities and avoid costly mistakes. Someone like you? Someone exactly like me. Richard was getting agitated. Lisa, what are you discussing? You've been talking for 5 minutes without translating. Mr. Nakamura is asking detailed questions about American manufacturing standards, I said smoothly. I'm providing context so he fully understands your capabilities. It's important for building trust. It wasn't entirely a lie. We were discussing trust, just not in the way Richard thought. Mr. Tanaka, who'd been listening carefully, asked in Japanese, "Are you proposing that Nakamura Corporation hire you as a consultant?" "I'm proposing that I can provide value beyond this single deal with Caldwell Industries. I can help you navigate the American market, vet potential partners, and avoid the cultural misunderstandings that have cost you money in the past. But this conversation should happen separately from tonight's dinner, which is about finalizing Mr. Caldwell's contract." Mr. Nakamura nodded slowly. "You're very strategic, Ms. Chen Morrison, and very bold. I appreciate both qualities." He switched to English, addressing Richard directly. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm satisfied with the contract terms we've discussed. My legal team will send the final documents next week." Richard's face lit up with relief. "That's wonderful news, Mr. Nakamura. Thank you for your trust in Caldwell Industries." "I trust Ms. Chen Morrison," Mr. Nakamura replied, his English careful but clear. "She has proven to be honest and capable. You're fortunate to work with her." The implication was clear to everyone at the table. The deal was happening because of me, not because of Richard. After dinner, as Richard was arranging transportation, Mr. Nakamura's assistant approached me with a business card. "Mr. Nakamura would like to schedule a private meeting with you next week without Mr. Caldwell. Are you available?" My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. "Yes, I'm available. Please send me the details." In the car ride back, Richard was euphoric. "We did it, Lisa. This deal is going to save the company. I knew if we just stayed professional and focused, we could close it. Congratulations, Mr. Caldwell. And listen, I know we've had our disagreements, but I want you to know that I see your value. Once this deal is finalized and the money starts coming in, we should discuss expanding your role, maybe bringing you on full-time." "That's generous of you." He didn't hear the irony in my voice, didn't realize that while he was celebrating closing his deal, I was planning something that would make his offer irrelevant. The meeting with Mr. Nakamura happened 3 days later at his hotel suite. No Richard, no other Caldwell Industries. Employees. Just me, Mr. Nakamura, Mr. Tanaka, and the third executive from the dinner, who turned out to be the head of Nakamura Corporation's American Expansion Division. I presented my proposal in Japanese with English supporting documents, a consulting service that would provide cultural guidance, partner vetting, and strategic advice for all of Nakamura's American business ventures. I would be their American representative, helping them avoid the mistakes that had cost them millions in failed partnerships. The presentation lasted 45 minutes. When I finished, Mr. Nakamura asked one question: "Why should we trust you with this responsibility?" "Because I've already proven I can be trusted," I replied. "I could have let your deal with Caldwell Industries fail. I could have translated poorly and cost both companies money. Instead, I fixed problems, provided honest advice, and helped create a successful partnership. I did that because I believe in doing business with integrity. That's not going to change whether I'm working with Caldwell Industries or directly with Nakamura Corporation. Mr. Tanaka spoke up. You're very young for this kind of responsibility. I'm young, but I'm not inexperienced. I've spent my entire life navigating between cultures. My mother is Chinese, I grew up in America, and I've studied Japanese language and culture for over a decade. I understand all three worlds because I've lived in all three. That's not something you can learn in business school. They excused themselves to discuss privately. I sat in that hotel suite, my hands shaking slightly, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life, or the smartest move. When they returned, Mr. Nakamura was smiling. We'd like to offer you a 6-month consulting contract. You'll advise on our American partnerships and help us evaluate new business opportunities. The compensation will be $15,000 per month, plus performance bonuses based on successful deals you help facilitate. I did the math instantly. $90,000 for 6 months, more than my mother made in 2 years of cleaning offices. I accept, I said, keeping my voice professional even though I wanted to scream with joy. When would you like me to start? Immediately. We have 3 potential partnerships we're evaluating right now. We'd like your assessment of all 3 by the end of next week. We shook hands, and I signed a contract that changed everything. As I left that hotel, I realized that I'd just done something that would have seemed impossible a month ago. The janitor's daughter had just become a consultant for one of Japan's largest corporations. But there was one problem. I was still under contract with Richard Caldwell for another 18 months, and he was going to lose his mind when he found out what I'd done. Patricia met me for coffee that evening, and I told her everything. She listened, then smiled. Lisa, do you understand what you've just accomplished? You've gone from cleaning offices to consulting for a multi-billion-dollar corporation in less than a month. That's extraordinary. Richard is going to try to stop me. The contract I signed with him says I can't work with competing clients. Nakamura isn't competing with Caldwell Industries. They're a client of Caldwell's. You're not violating your contract. You're expanding your professional network. Richard might not like it, but legally, he can't stop you. He's going to try anyway. Let him try. Lisa, you need to understand something. You've been playing defense this whole time, negotiating for scraps, trying to get Richard to see your value. But now you're in a position of strength. You don't need his approval anymore. You don't need his permission. You've built something independent of him. She was right. For the first time since this whole thing started, I wasn't reacting to Richard Caldwell. I was building my own path, and he was becoming irrelevant to it. If you've been following this journey and wondering how someone goes from being invisible to indispensable, stay tuned. Because what happens when Richard discovers that the woman he thought he controlled has just outmaneuvered him completely is going to redefine everything he thought he knew about power. The next morning, I sent Richard an email informing him that I'd taken on an additional consulting client and would need to adjust my availability for Caldwell Industries meetings. Professional, courteous, and completely within the terms of our contract. His response came within minutes. My office, now. I walked into Caldwell Industries through the front door, wearing my new professional clothes, carrying a leather portfolio that Patricia had given me. The receptionist who'd questioned my presence weeks ago now smiled and waved me through. Richard was waiting in his office, his face red with barely controlled anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? I'm building a consulting practice, Mr. Caldwell. Exactly what we discussed. We discussed you working for Caldwell Industries, not going behind my back to steal my clients. I didn't steal anyone. Nakamura Corporation approached me independently and offered me a consulting contract. I accepted. It doesn't interfere with my obligations to you. It absolutely interferes. You're supposed to be my translator, my consultant, working for my company. I'm an independent contractor, Mr. Caldwell, not your employee. There's a difference. He stood up, leaning across his desk in what was probably meant to be an intimidating gesture. "You signed a contract with me. I own your services for the next 18 months. You have exclusive rights to my translation services for business deals that compete with Caldwell Industries. Nakamura Corporation isn't your competitor. They're your client. I'm not violating our agreement." "This is betrayal, Lisa. After everything I've done for you, everything you've done for me?" I interrupted, my voice sharp. "Mr. Caldwell, you found me emptying trash cans and used me to save your company. You paid me a fraction of what I was worth and treated me like I should be grateful for the opportunity. You didn't do anything for me. I did everything for you. I gave you a chance when no one else would have. You gave me a chance because you were desperate and had no other options. Let's not pretend this was generosity." The office went silent. Richard stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time, not as the janitor's daughter or the convenient translator, but as someone who just outplayed him at his own game. "You're making a mistake," he said finally, his voice cold. "Nakamura Corporation is my client. I brought them in. Any work you do with them should go through Caldwell Industries. Then you should have put that in our contract. But you didn't, because you never imagined I'd be valuable enough for it to matter." I turned to leave, and his voice stopped me one last time. "Your mother still works here, Lisa. It would be unfortunate if her employment situation became complicated." I turned back slowly, and he must have seen something in my expression that made him realize he'd just made a terrible mistake. "If my mother's employment changes in any way that seems retaliatory, I'll make sure Mr. Nakamura knows exactly how Caldwell Industries treats its workers. I'll make sure every potential Japanese partner knows, and I'll make sure the story of how you threatened a woman's job because her daughter wouldn't let you exploit her becomes very, very public. Do you understand me, Mr. Caldwell?" He understood. I could see it in his face, the realization that the power dynamic had shifted completely, and there was nothing he could do about it. As I walked out of his office for what I knew would be one of the last times, I felt something I'd never felt before in that building. I felt free. The janitor's daughter had just declared her independence, and the real story was only beginning. The first month working with Nakamura Corporation was a revelation. They sent me to evaluate 3 potential American partnerships: a tech startup in Silicon Valley, a real estate development in Miami, and a consumer goods manufacturer in Chicago. I spent weeks researching each company, conducting interviews, analyzing financials, and most importantly, assessing whether the American partners understood and respected Japanese business culture. My reports were thorough, honest, and saved Nakamura Corporation from 2 disasters. The tech startup was a fraud, inflating their user numbers and burning through cash. The real estate deal was legitimate, but structured in a way that would have given the American developers too much control. Only the Chicago manufacturer was worth pursuing, and I helped restructure the deal to protect Nakamura's interests. Mr. Nakamura called me personally after receiving my 3rd report. "Ms. Chen Morrison, you've already saved us more money than we're paying you. The tech company, we were days away from investing $5 million. Your investigation prevented a catastrophic loss. That's what you hired me for, Mr. Nakamura." "Yes, but I'm beginning to think we hired you for too small a role. I'd like to discuss expanding your responsibilities when I'm in New York next month." Meanwhile, Richard Caldwell was unraveling. The Nakamura contract had saved his company from immediate bankruptcy, but it hadn't solved his fundamental problems: poor management, bad strategic decisions, and a corporate culture that drove away talented people. Without me there to fix his mistakes, those problems were becoming impossible to hide. I heard through Jennifer, who'd started texting me occasionally, that Richard had tried to hire 3 different translators for other international deals. All 3 had failed to build the kind of relationships I'd created. One deal fell through completely, another was still in negotiation hell after 2 months. He keeps asking about you, Jennifer told me over coffee. Wants to know if you'd come back, take on more projects. I think he's finally realizing what he lost. What? Did you tell him that you're too busy with your actual consulting practice to save his company anymore? She smiled. It felt good to say it. Jennifer had given her notice the week after I'd confronted Richard. She'd found a position at a company that actually valued its employees. Watching you stand up to him made me realize I didn't have to accept being treated like that either, she'd told me. But the real turning point came 6 weeks after I'd started working with Nakamura Corporation. Mr. Nakamura flew to New York with his entire executive team for a series of meetings, and he invited me to dinner, not as a translator but as a consultant and potential partner. Ms. Chen Morrison, he began after we'd ordered, Nakamura Corporation is planning a significant expansion into the American market over the next 5 years. We're looking at investments totaling over $200 million across multiple sectors. What we need is someone who can be our American representative, not just evaluating deals, but actively seeking opportunities, building relationships, and representing our interests. That's a substantial responsibility, I said carefully. It is. Which is why we're prepared to offer substantial compensation. We'd like to establish a formal partnership. You would create your own consulting firm, and Nakamura Corporation would be your primary client with a 5-year contract. Annual retainer of $300,000, plus equity participation in successful deals you help facilitate. I kept my expression neutral, but my mind was racing. $300,000 a year, equity and deals worth millions. My own firm. There's one complication, I said. I still have a contract with Caldwell Industries for another 16 months. Mr. Nakamura smiled slightly. Actually, that's no longer an issue. We've decided to terminate our manufacturing contract with Caldwell Industries. The world seemed to stop. I'm sorry, what? Our quality control team has identified significant issues with their production processes, issues that were apparently hidden during our initial negotiations. We're exercising the termination clause in our contract. I thought back to those early meetings, to Richard's presentations that I'd translated and adjusted. Had I missed something? Had I failed to catch problems that were now coming back to haunt the deal? Mr. Tanaka, who was also at the dinner, must have seen my concern. Ms. Chen Morrison, this is not a reflection on your work. You translated accurately and advised us well. The problems we've discovered are recent. Cost-cutting measures that Mr. Caldwell implemented after the contract was signed. He's sacrificing quality to increase his profit margins. He's desperate, I said quietly. The Nakamura contract was supposed to save his company, but it's not enough. He's trying to squeeze more profit out of it. Yes, and in doing so, he's violated our agreement. We'll be pursuing legal action to recover our initial investment. Mr. Nakamura paused. Which means your contract with Caldwell Industries will likely become void when his company declares bankruptcy. We estimate that will happen within 3 months. The pieces fell into place. Richard's company was dying, and this time, I wasn't there to save it. The deal I'd helped him secure, the deal that was supposed to be his salvation, was falling apart because he couldn't help himself from cutting corners and chasing short-term profits. I accept your offer, I told Mr. Nakamura. I'll establish the consulting firm and begin immediately. We shook hands, and I felt the weight of what had just happened. 6 weeks ago, I'd been negotiating for 6% of one deal. Now I was about to become the American representative for a multi-billion-dollar corporation, with my own firm and a contract worth millions over 5 years. The next morning, I called Patricia. I need your help. Setting up a company. I was wondering when you'd call, she laughed. I've already drafted the paperwork. What are you going to name it? I thought about my mother. About 16 years of being invisible, about every person who'd ever looked through us like we didn't exist. Bridge Consulting, I said, because that's what we do, build bridges between worlds that don't understand each other. 2 weeks later, Bridge Consulting LLC was official. Patricia helped me set up the business structure, negotiate the final terms with Nakamura Corporation, and even invested in the company herself. I told you I invest in people who've been underestimated, she said. This is going to be huge, Lisa. The news about Nakamura terminating their contract with Caldwell Industries hit the business press on a Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, Richard's company stock had dropped 40%. By Wednesday, he was facing a lawsuit from Nakamura Corporation for breach of contract and fraud. Jennifer texted me, "It's chaos here. Richard's locked in his office, lawyers everywhere. People are updating their resumes. I think you might have been right about the bankruptcy timeline." I should have felt triumphant, should have felt vindicated, but mostly I felt sad. Sad that Richard had been given every opportunity to succeed and had destroyed it through arrogance and greed. Sad that good people who worked at Caldwell Industries were going to lose their jobs because of his failures. And then, something unexpected happened. David Chen, the VP of Operations, who'd questioned my authority in that early meeting, called me. "Lisa, I know we didn't start off well, but I need to ask you something. Is there any way to save this company?" "Why are you asking me?" "Because you're the only person who ever successfully navigated a deal with Nakamura Corporation, because you saw problems that the rest of us missed, and because I've spent the last 2 months watching this company fall apart and realizing that you were right about everything." I met him at a coffee shop, and he laid out the situation. It was worse than I'd thought. Richard had been hiding financial problems for over a year, making increasingly desperate decisions to cover losses. The Nakamura deal hadn't been his salvation, it had been his last gasp. "The company's going to declare bankruptcy within 6 weeks, David said. "Richard will probably face criminal charges for fraud, and 150 people are going to lose their jobs right before the holidays. What do you want from me?" "I want to know if there's a way to save the parts of this company that are worth saving. The actual manufacturing operation is solid. It's the management and financial structure that's corrupt. If we could separate the good from the bad." I thought about it. Thought about my mother, who'd worked for Caldwell Industries for 16 years. Thought about Jennifer and the other employees who'd been caught in Richard's disaster. Thought about whether I had any obligation to help. "I might know someone who'd be interested in acquiring the manufacturing assets," I said slowly, "but it would mean Richard loses everything. The company, his position, his reputation. Are you okay with that?" David met my eyes. "Richard made his choices. I'm trying to save the people who didn't." I made a call to Mr. Nakamura and explained the situation. Within a week, Nakamura Corporation had made an offer to acquire Caldwell Industries' manufacturing division, the profitable part of the company, for a fraction of what it would have been worth before. The scandal. They'd keep most of the employees, including my mother. They'd install new management, including David Chen as the new director of operations. Richard Caldwell would be left with nothing but debt and legal problems. The day the acquisition was announced, I went to Caldwell Industries. One last time. Richard was in his office, packing boxes. His expensive furniture was being removed. His photographs with senators and CEOs were already gone. He looked up when I entered, and for a moment neither of us spoke. "You did this," he said finally. "You destroyed my company." "No, Mr. Caldwell. You destroyed your company. I just stopped saving it. I gave you an opportunity. You used me when you were desperate, paid me as little as possible, and threatened my mother when I wouldn't let you exploit me anymore. That's not giving someone an opportunity. That's taking advantage of someone you thought was powerless." He slumped into his chair, suddenly looking much older. "What happens now?" "Now, Nakamura Corporation owns your manufacturing division. Your employees keep their jobs under better management. You face the consequences of fraud and mismanagement. And I continue, building a consulting firm that's already worth more than you ever paid me. You're just the janitor's daughter," he said, but there was no strength in it anymore. Just the desperate words of a man who'd lost everything because he'd underestimated the wrong person. "Yes," I agreed. "I'm the..." Janitor's daughter. The one who speaks 5 languages, who understands international business, who built relationships you couldn't maintain, and who just helped orchestrate the acquisition of your company. The janitor's daughter, who's now a consultant for one of Japan's largest corporations. That janitor's daughter. I left him there, surrounded by boxes and the ruins of his arrogance. That evening I took my mother to dinner at a nice restaurant. Not as nice as the one where I'd met with Mr. Nakamura, but nicer than anywhere we'd ever been together. Nakamura Corporation is keeping you on. I told her, same job but with full benefits, better pay and actual respect. David Chen is the new director, and he's committed to treating employees like human beings. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Bao Bao, what did you do? I stopped being invisible, Mum, and I made sure you didn't have to be invisible anymore either. She reached across the table and took my hand. Your father would be so proud. I learned from you, I said. You spent 16 years being underestimated, being treated like you didn't matter, but you never stopped working hard, never stopped believing I could be. More, you taught me that being underestimated is only a disadvantage if you believe it yourself. The next week, Bridge Consulting officially opened for business. Patricia had helped me rent a small office in Midtown. Nothing fancy, but professional. My own space, my own company, my own future. Mr. Nakamura sent flowers with a note. To new beginnings and partnerships built on respect. Jennifer sent a text. Richard's office is being turned into a conference room. They're erasing him like he never existed. Thought you'd want to know. And David Chen sent an email. First day under new management. Morale is already better. Thank you for giving us a second chance. I sat in my new office, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, and realized something profound. I hadn't set out to destroy Richard Caldwell. I'd set out to build something for myself. His destruction had been a side effect of his own choices, his own arrogance, his own inability to see value in people he'd dismissed. The janitor's daughter hadn't just closed a $1 million deal. She'd built an entire company, saved 150 jobs, and proven that being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all, because nobody sees you coming until it's too late for them to stop you. But the story wasn't quite over yet, because the real lesson, the one that would define everything that came after, was still waiting to be learned. 18 months after that first panic-stricken meeting where Richard Caldwell discovered his translator was stuck in traffic, I stood in front of a conference room full of business students at Columbia University. Patricia had asked me to guest lecture in her entrepreneurship class, and I'd agreed, though public speaking still made me nervous. Most of you in this room have impressive resume, I began. Top universities, internships at prestigious companies, networks full of successful people. You've been told your entire lives that you're destined for success, and you probably are. I paused, looking at their eager, privileged faces. But today, I want to talk about the people you're going to overlook, the janitors who clean your offices, the translators you'll hire and underpay, the assistants you'll treat as invisible, because those people, the ones you dismiss, the ones you underestimate, they're watching you, learning from you, and sometimes they're smarter than you'll ever realize until it's too late. I told them my story, not to brag, but to teach. I told them about my mother, about being invisible, about the moment Richard Caldwell needed me and didn't even know my name. I told them about building Bridge Consulting from nothing, about the importance of seeing people's value regardless of their job title or background. When I finished, a student raised her hand. But didn't you kind of destroy that CEO's life? Isn't that revenge, not justice? It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself many times. Richard Caldwell destroyed his own life, I replied. He committed fraud, cut corners on quality control, and built a company culture based on exploitation. I didn't cause any of that. What I did was stop saving him from the consequences of his own choices. There's a difference between revenge and simply refusing to be someone's safety net when they've never respected you. Another student asked, what happened to him, to Mr. Caldwell? He settled the lawsuit with Nakamura Corporation, which took most of his remaining assets. He's working as a consultant now, ironically. Last I heard, he's actually good at it. Turns out when you're not. Running a company into the ground, you have valuable experience to offer. He's humbler than he used to be. I'd like to think he learned something, but I honestly don't know. I didn't tell them that Richard had sent me an email 6 months ago. A short message that just said, "You were right about everything. I'm sorry." I'd never responded. Some apologies come too late to matter, and some lessons are only learned through loss. Bridge Consulting had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. In 18 months, we'd facilitated over $50 million in successful partnerships between Asian and American companies. I'd hired 3 other consultants, all people who'd been overlooked or underestimated in traditional corporate environments. Maria Santos, the woman who'd been fired for reporting harassment, was now my director of operations. Jennifer was my executive assistant and learning the consulting business. And my mother had retired, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Nakamura Corporation had offered her a generous severance package when they restructured the company, and combined with the money I was now able to provide, she finally had the choice to stop cleaning offices. "What will you do?" I'd asked her when she told me. "I'm going to take classes," she said, her eyes bright with possibility. "Maybe finish my nursing certification, maybe just learn things I never had time to learn. I'm going to be visible, Bao Bao, just like you taught me." The most unexpected development came from Mr. Nakamura himself. During one of his visits to New York, he invited me to lunch, just the 2 of us, no business agenda. "Ms. Chen Morrison," he said, "I want to tell you why I really gave you that first opportunity. I assumed it was because I saved Mr. Caldwell's deal. Partially. But there was another reason." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "When I was young, I worked in my father's factory. I was the owner's son. But I started on the factory floor, learning every job. There was a cleaning woman there, an older woman, who everyone ignored. One day I made a mistake, a serious mistake in a production process. She saw it and corrected it before it became a disaster. When I thanked her, she said something I never forgot. Just because people don't see us doesn't mean we don't see everything." He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Vulnerability, maybe, or recognition. "When I met you, translating in your cleaning uniform, I saw that woman. I saw someone who'd been invisible but had been watching, learning, understanding everything. I knew that kind of person, someone who's been underestimated their entire life, would be more valuable than 100 Harvard MBAs, because you had something they didn't. You had something to prove. And did I prove it? You exceeded every expectation, which is why I want to offer you something new." He slid a folder across the table. "Nakamura Corporation is establishing a venture capital fund focused on investing in overlooked entrepreneurs, immigrants, women, people from non-traditional backgrounds. We want you to run it. $100 million to invest over 5 years in people who remind us of you." I opened the folder, scanning the proposal. It was extraordinary. It was terrifying. It was everything I'd never dared to dream. Why me? Because you understand what it means to be invisible. You understand what it means to be underestimated. And you understand that the most valuable people are often the ones everyone else overlooks. That's not something we can teach. Ms. Chen Morrison, that's something you only learn by living it. I accepted, of course. Bridge Consulting became Bridge Ventures, and we started investing in the janitor's daughters and sons of the world, the brilliant people who'd been told they weren't good enough, smart enough, connected enough to succeed. Our first investment was in a cleaning company started by 3 immigrant women who developed an eco-friendly cleaning solution while working night shifts. They'd been laughed out of every investor meeting they'd attended. We gave them $500,000 in mentorship. 18 months later, their company was worth $10 million and employing over 100 people. Our second investment was in a translation technology startup founded by a former Uber driver who spoke 7 languages. The tech world had dismissed him because he didn't have a computer science degree. We saw what they missed. Someone who understood language, culture, and real-world problems that needed solving. Every investment we made was a bet on someone the world had underestimated, and we were winning those bets more often than traditional venture capital firms won theirs, because we understood something they didn't. Desperation and determination create innovation that privilege never could. 2 years after that first meeting, I was invited to speak at a business conference in Tokyo. As I stood on that stage, addressing an audience of executives and entrepreneurs, I thought about the journey that had brought me there. I thought about my mother scrubbing toilets while I did homework in empty offices. I thought about Richard Caldwell, so certain of his superiority that he couldn't see the value in the person emptying his trash. I thought about Mr. Nakamura, who'd seen something in me that I was only beginning to see in myself, and I thought about every person who'd ever been invisible, overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. The most dangerous person in any room, I told that audience, is the one you don't see, the assistant you ignore, the janitor you dismiss, the translator you underpay. They're watching you, learning from you, understanding your weaknesses better than you understand them yourself. And someday, when you need them most, they'll have a choice: save you or save themselves. The question you need to ask yourself is this: when that moment comes, what will they choose? And will you have earned their loyalty or just their resentment? After the speech, a young woman approached me. She was wearing a hotel uniform, housekeeping, I guessed from the name tag. "Ms. Chen Morrison," she said in hesitant English. "I heard your story. My mother cleans offices too. I speak 4 languages, but everyone tells me I should just be grateful to have a job. Your story makes me think maybe I could be more." I took her card, got her contact information, and told her about Bridge Ventures. "We invest in people like you," I said. "People who've been told to be grateful for scraps. If you have an idea, a dream, something you want to build, send me a proposal. We'll look at it seriously." Her eyes filled with tears. "You would do that for someone like me, especially for someone like you, because I know what you're capable of, even if nobody else does yet." 6 months. Later, we invested in her language education startup. She's now teaching Japanese to American business professionals and English to Japanese students, building bridges the same way I had. That's what Bridge Ventures became. Not just an investment fund, but a statement, a declaration that the people society overlooks are often the ones with the most potential. That being underestimated is an advantage if you're smart enough to use it. That invisible doesn't mean powerless. My mother came to my office one day, looking around at the space we'd built, the team we'd assembled, the companies we'd invested in, the lives we'd changed. "Your father would be so proud," she said again, like she had that night at dinner. "I learned everything from you, Mom. You taught me that dignity isn't something people give you, it's something you claim for yourself. You taught me that being invisible means you see everything. You taught me that the people who underestimate you are giving you the greatest gift, the element of surprise." She smiled, and I saw in her face something I'd never seen before. Not just pride, but recognition. She saw herself in what I'd built, saw that her 16 years of being invisible hadn't been wasted. They'd been an education for both of us. The last time I saw Richard Caldwell was at a business networking event. He was there as a consultant, working the room, trying to rebuild a career from the ashes of his failure. When he saw me, he hesitated, then approached. "Lisa," he said, "you look well. I've been following Bridge Ventures. Impressive work." "Thank you." I wanted to apologize for how I treated you, for how I treated your mother, for not seeing what was right in front of me until it was too late. I looked at him, this man who'd once had so much power over my life, who'd threatened my mother's job, who'd tried to pay me $500 for saving his company. He looked smaller now, not physically, but in presence, humbled by consequences he'd never imagined would touch him. "I appreciate the apology," I said. "I hope you've learned something from what happened." "I have. I've learned that the people you dismiss are often the ones who determine your fate. I've learned that arrogance is expensive, and I've learned that some opportunities only come once, and if you're too blind to see them, they don't come back." It wasn't a friendship. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement, and sometimes that's enough. As I left that event, I thought about the moral of this story, the lesson that had taken me from emptying trash cans to running a venture capital fund in less than 3 years. The lesson isn't revenge is sweet, or that you should destroy people who underestimate you. The lesson is simpler and more powerful. Everyone you meet has value, even if you can't see it immediately. The janitor might speak 5 languages. The assistant might be smarter than you. The person you dismiss today might be the person who determines your fate tomorrow. Treat people with dignity, not because they can help you, but because dignity is what separates good people from people who just happen to be successful. See people, really see them, not their job title, not their uniform, not their position in the hierarchy. See their humanity, their potential, their value. Because the world is full of invisible people who are watching, learning, and waiting for their moment. And when that moment comes, when they step out of the shadows and into the light, you'll want to be someone who treated them with respect when they were invisible. Not because it's strategic, but because it's right. The janitor's daughter closed $1 million deal, yes. But more importantly, she opened doors for thousands of other invisible people to step through. She proved that being underestimated isn't a disadvantage. It's a superpower if you're brave enough to use it. And if this story resonates with you, if you've ever been invisible or overlooked or told you weren't good enough, remember this. They're not seeing you clearly. But that doesn't mean you can't see yourself clearly. Build something, prove something, not to them, but to yourself. Because the most satisfying victory isn't destroying the people who underestimated you. It's becoming so successful that their opinion stops mattering entirely. That's the real power of being invisible. Nobody sees you coming until you've already changed everything. And then it's too late for them to stop you. But it's exactly the right time for you to help the next invisible person find their voice, claim their power, and step into the light. That's not revenge. That's revolution. And it starts with one person deciding they're done being invisible. Maybe that person is you.